I never thought of myself as an impeccable father. Every morning when I looked in the mirror, I saw the reflection of a 70-year-old man with wrinkles that cut across his face like dried-up riverbeds. That face, scorched by the California sun and hardened by decades of hard work, belonged to me, Sherman Thornhill, a man who had built an empire from nothing but lost what no amount of money could buy. My mansion in Beverly Hills on Elmden Drive had always seemed too big to me. 5 bedrooms, 6 bathrooms, a home theater, a wine cellar, and a pool overlooking the city. All the trappings of success have long ceased to please. In the mornings, I would go out on the terrace with a cup of black coffee and look out over the city below, thinking that my life was like one of those expensive cars I sell. Shiny body, powerful engine, but empty inside. Thornhill Motors is a chain of premium car dealerships scattered throughout Southern California. 3 decades ago, I started with a small used car lot in Van Nuys, and today my name is known by anyone who has ever considered buying a Porsche, Bentley, or Ferrari in this city of millionaires and dreamers. I didn't inherit this business. I built it with my own hands. In 1975, when I was 20, I came to Los Angeles from Tulsa with $300 in my pocket and an old Chevy that broke down a week after I arrived. There was no money to fix it, so I took a job as a mechanic's helper at a machine shop. Spent the night there, in the backyard, in the car I was fixing. The owner, Vincenzo, an old Italian, noticed that I knew engines better than his sons and began to trust me with complicated orders. 2 years later, I was already working in a car dealership. 3 years later, I was the best salesman in town. By 35, I opened my first salon. By 40, I had 5. Today, Thornhill Motors has 17 locations with an annual turnover in the hundreds of millions. But something always eluded me, something important. Elaine, my wife, was always reminding me of it. Sherman, you missed the PTA meeting again. Sherman, Alistair scored the first goal, and you weren't at the match. Sherman, your son will grow up, not even knowing what his father looks like. Elaine left early. Cancer took her when Alistair was only 12. I remember the day I stood at her bedside holding her hand, promising to take care of our boy. She only smiled sadly and said, "First learn to be with him, not just provide for him." I didn't realize then what she meant. I do now. After Elaine died, I sank even deeper into my work. I thought that by providing my son with better schools, better clothes, better opportunities, I was making up for my mother's absence. But I couldn't compensate for my own absence. Alistair grew up withdrawn, resentful of the world and especially of me. When he turned 16, I gave him his first car, a bright red Mustang. He crashed it 2 weeks later, miraculously surviving. I yelled at him, called him irresponsible, told him he didn't appreciate what he had. He responded by calling me a soulless old man trying to buy off gifts for his absence from his life. We were both right. At 21, Alistair left home, declaring that he wanted to make his own life without my help. I respected that decision, though deep down I hoped he would return soon. He did come back 3 years later with no money, no job, and a broken heart after his first serious relationship. I took him back without question and offered him a place in the company. Not out of pity, Alistair had always been a smart guy, with a good sense of people, which is invaluable in our business. He accepted reluctantly, as if he was doing me a favor. Maybe he was. The next few years were like a Cold War. We worked together, lived under the same roof, but there was no real contact between us. Alistair performed his duties in the company impeccably, but never took the initiative, never talked about what he really wanted to do in life. I didn't know how to break through that wall. Family dinners were held in tense silence, interrupted only by polite requests to pass the salt or pepper. Sometimes, looking across the table at my adult son, I saw Elaine's features in him, the same stubborn chin, the same expressive eyes, and it hurt. Alistair was 35 when he told me he wanted me to meet his new girlfriend. I was surprised. He didn't usually initiate me into his personal life. "She's special, Father," he said with an unaccustomed warmth in his voice. I was glad. Maybe this woman would make him happy. Maybe she could help us find our way back to each other too. Kimberly Huxley showed up at our house on a warm September evening. I remember opening the door and seeing her, a slender blonde in a tight black dress, with flawless makeup and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She held out her hand to me with a perfect manicure and said, "I finally get to meet the legendary Sherman Thornhill. Alistair has told me so much about you." Her voice was melodic, with a slight accent I couldn't quite pinpoint. Perhaps East Coast with a dash of something European. She was beautiful, no doubt, but there was something cold, calculating about her beauty. I shook her hand and felt an alarm bell ring inside me. At dinner, Kimberly was the epitome of charm. She laughed at my old jokes, listened intently to stories about the formation of the business, admired the wine collection. But I noticed her gaze sliding over the furnishings, assessing the value of the paintings on the walls, the antique furniture, the crystal glasses. "What do you do, Kimberly?" I asked when our housekeeper Esther served dessert. "I work in public relations," she replied, carefully breaking off a piece of chocolate souffle. "I represent several hotels and restaurants. Nothing fancy, of course, not like your empire." There was something in her tone that made me even more wary. A pretense of modesty or subtle flattery? "Where did you meet Alistair?" I continued. "At a charity auction to benefit sick children," Alistair interjected. Kimberly was organizing the event. She saved the evening when the main sponsor refused to participate at the last minute. "It was a disaster," Kimberly chimed in. "But fortunately, Alistair turned out to be a true knight. Not only did he make a generous donation on behalf of Thornhill Motors, but he helped me convince the other guests to increase their contributions." I looked at my son in surprise. He had never mentioned this auction or the donation from the company. "That was 3 months ago," Alistair added, as if reading my mind. "You were in Europe, at the Geneva Motor Show." "Yes, of course," I nodded, though I felt a prick of irritation inside. Any corporate expenses of that nature had to be coordinated with me, even if I was overseas. "We've been inseparable ever since." Kimberly placed her hand on Alistair's arm. "Your son is an amazing man, Mr. Thornhill. You should be proud of him." "I am proud," I replied automatically, watching Alistair look at this woman with an adoration I'd never seen in his eyes before. After dinner, we moved into the living room. Kimberly stopped in front of a picture of Elaine standing on the mantel. "What a beautiful woman," she said. "You and she have a lot in common, Alistair." "That's my mother," Alistair replied dryly. "She died when I was 12. "Oh, how sad." Kimberly shifted her gaze to me. "It must have been very hard for you, Mr. Thornhill, raising your son alone." "My father didn't raise me," Alistair interjected again before I could respond. "He was too busy building his empire. I was raised by nannies and boarding schools." There was a bitterness in his words that hit me like a slap in the face. Kimberly gave me a sizing glance, and in that moment I realized that she didn't see me as a person, but as a bank account. To her, I was just an adjunct to the fortune Alistair would one day inherit. "I did what I could," I said quietly. "After your mother died." "Let's not talk about the sad stuff," Kimberly interrupted, taking Alistair under her arm. "Tell me better about your car collection, Mr. Thornhill. Alistair tells me you have a rare 1,963-year-old Jaguar E-Type." The rest of the evening passed in conversations about cars, real estate, and investments. Kimberly asked questions, showing a surprising familiarity with the financial aspects of my business. I answered evasively, watching her manipulate the conversation back to the topics of wealth and inheritance. When they finally left, Alistair had insisted on spending the night at Kimberly's apartment in West Hollywood. I sat in the darkened living room for a long time, with a glass of whiskey, looking at Elaine's picture. "What do you think of her, dear?" I asked quietly, as I had done so often over the years. "She's after our boy, isn't she?" The picture was silent, but I knew Elaine would agree with me. Kimberly Huxley was a predator in designer clothes, and she had her eye on our son, or, more accurately, our fortune. I finished my whiskey and went upstairs to my bedroom. Sleep wouldn't come. I lay staring at the ceiling, thinking about how to warn Alistair without pushing him further away. Our relationship was too fragile for a direct confrontation. If I told him his lover was a calculating money hunter, he'd just assume I was trying to sabotage his happiness. In the morning, I went down to the kitchen earlier than usual. Esther, as usual, was already preparing breakfast. "Mr. Thornhill, did you not sleep well?" she asked, placing a cup of fresh coffee in front of me. "There was a lot to think about, Esther," I replied. What did you think of Alistair's girlfriend? Esther had worked in my house for almost 20 years. She had watched Alistair grow up, witnessed our fights and rare moments of intimacy. Her opinion was important to me. A beautiful girl, Esther began cautiously. Very attentive to detail. What do you mean? When you and Mr. Alistair were talking in the study, she was asking me about the house. How many bedrooms? What kind of security system? Who tends the garden? Even asked me how much you were paying me. I frowned. And what did you reply? That it was none of her business. Esther allowed herself a slight smile. I didn't like her, Mr. Thornhill. She has eyes like that fox that wandered into our garden last summer. Do you remember when she snatched all the chickens from the neighbor's chicken coop? I nodded, remembering the red-haired predator that had terrorized the neighborhood until the gardener caught her and took her to the woods away from Beverly Hills. I'm afraid that Vixen won't be so easy to escort out, I said, finishing my coffee. She's already set her teeth on our boy. Mr. Alistair has always been stubborn, Esther sighed, just like his mother. Mrs. Elaine never took advice once she'd made up her mind about something, either. I smiled, remembering Elaine's stubbornness. She was the only one who could out-argue me. Perhaps that quality had passed on to Alistair, along with her eyes and smile. That afternoon, I went to Thornhill Motors' head office earlier than usual. Alistair showed up around noon, radiant and more relaxed than ever. Good morning, Father. He nodded at me as he walked past my office. Alistair, I called out to him. Come in for a minute. He came in and sat across from me, fiddling with the keys to his car, the sporty BMW I'd given him for his last birthday. What do you think of last night? I asked, trying to keep my voice sounding neutral. Kimberly impressed you, didn't she? There was pride in his voice. She's interesting woman, I answered cautiously. How long have you two known each other? 3 months, 2 weeks, and 4 days, he smiled. But it seems like a lifetime. She understands me, Father. Really understands. I nodded, not knowing what to say. My son was in love, that much was obvious, and warning him now was useless. I'm happy for you, I finally said. Just take your time, okay? Get to know her better. Alistair frowned. What do you mean? Nothing in particular. Just advice from someone who's lived longer than you. You didn't like her. It wasn't a question, but a statement. I barely know her, I replied evasively. Let's talk about work. We have a new shipment of Porsche 911s arriving today. We need to check the paperwork. Alistair nodded, but I could see he was annoyed. The conversation about Kimberly was over, but not forgotten. I realized I had to be more careful. One wrong move and I could lose my son for good. After that first dinner, Kimberly became a frequent visitor to our house. At first, she showed up with Alistair 2 or 3 times a week, then almost every night. And after a month, my son announced that she was moving in with us. I didn't mind. The house was big enough that we wouldn't get in each other's way. And besides, I hoped to get to know her better, to understand what lay behind that perfect exterior. Kimberly Huxley proved to be a master of adaptation. In my presence, she was respectful and alert, like a daughter-in-law from an old-fashioned novel. In conversations with me, she showed an interest in the car business, asking intelligent questions about company strategy, markets, and competitors. When Alistair was around, she became a loving, caring friend, attentive to his every word. But I noticed things that Alistair, blinded by love, didn't see. How her tone changed when she spoke to Esther or the gardener. How her eyes grow cold when she thinks no one is looking. How she studies the papers I leave on the study table when I leave the room. One morning I went down to the kitchen earlier than usual and caught Kimberly talking to Esther. She didn't notice me, and I stopped in the doorway listening. Does Mr. Thornhill often have visitors? Kimberly asked, picking through the fruit in the vase. Not very often, Esther answered, kneading pancake batter. Mostly business meetings. And the women? Kimberly's voice became carelessly curious. Surely such a successful man must have girlfriends? Mr. Thornhill is a very busy man, Esther said evasively. Come on, Kimberly stepped closer, lowering her voice. You've worked here for what, 20 years? You must know all his secrets. Is he seeing anyone? Is there a woman who might claim a piece of the inheritance? At this point, I coughed, signaling my presence. Kimberly changed instantly. She squared her shoulders, smiled, came up to me with a greeting. Good morning, Sherman. What a beautiful day it is. I was just telling Esther that Alistair and I would like to have a little dinner this weekend. Invite a few of his friends over so I can get to know them better. Would that be okay with you? I looked at her, noting how quickly she'd changed the subject. Of course, Kimberly. It's your house. Oh, no, she touched my shoulder playfully. It's your home. I'm just a guest. A very grateful guest. After breakfast, I found Esther alone and asked, what did Kimberly really talk to you about? Esther sighed. She asked about your will, sir. She wanted to know if you were leaving everything to Mr. Alistair or if there were other heirs. And she also wondered if you were in good health, if you had any heart problems. I nodded. My suspicions were confirmed. Kimberly wasn't just a money hunter, she was a strategist with a long-term plan. That same evening, I tried to talk to Alistair. He came home from the office late, tired and irritable. Kimberly wasn't home yet. She was having dinner with her friends. Son, I began when we were alone in the living room, I want to talk to you about Kimberly. Alistair immediately tensed up. What's wrong with her? I'm not saying there's anything wrong with her, I continued carefully. It's just that you've only known her for 3 months. Don't you think things are moving too fast? No, it doesn't, Alistair said. When you know it's what you want, why wait? Because people aren't always what they seem, I said softly, especially when it comes to someone with your position. My position? Alistair grinned. You mean with your money? It's not just money, Alistair. Status, opportunities, connections. You think she's with me because of that? His eyes narrowed. Do you think I'm impossible to love for nothing? I didn't say that. I felt the conversation was going the wrong way. Of course you can be loved. You're my son, and I— Don't start, he interrupted. Don't give me those belated fatherly feelings. Where were you when I really needed them? Kimberly is the only person who accepts me for who I am, doesn't try to make a copy of me or use me as an extension of her business. Alistair, I'm just asking you to be careful. I tried to remain calm. Get to know her better before you make any big decisions. What decisions? He squinted. What do you mean? I realized I'd said too much. Nothing specific, just general advice. No, you meant something, Alistair insisted. What do you know? Did you check her out? Hired a private investigator? It wasn't a bad idea, but I didn't pursue it. No, of course not. At that moment, the front door opened and we heard Kimberly's voice. Honey, I'm home. The conversation was over, and I realized I'd only made things worse. Alistair gave me a cold look and went out to meet his beloved. From that evening on, the tension between us only grew. Alistair began to avoid me, and Kimberly seemed to realize my distrust and redoubled her efforts to impress me. She started showing up at the company's offices, ostensibly to have lunch with Alistair, but really to study the business from the inside. The staff quickly fell under her spell. Kimberly had a way of putting people at ease, smiling, remembering names, asking questions about families, bringing homemade baked goods. Such a sweet girl, said my secretary Betty, who had worked with me for more than 15 years. Mr. Alistair is a very lucky man. I only nodded, knowing that any objection would look like senile grouchiness. 2 weeks after our conversation with Mr. Alistair, upon entering my office cubicle, I found someone going through my papers. Nothing was missing, but some folders weren't lying the way I'd left them. The desk drawer that held documents about recent transactions was all jumbled up. Betty, who was in my office? I asked the secretary. Just Mr. Alistair, sir. He came in this morning, looking for the contract for the new Bentleys. I frowned. Alistair had never shown any interest in supplier contracts before. It wasn't his area of responsibility in the company. That same evening, when I returned home, I found Alistair and Kimberly in the living room. They were sitting side by side on the sofa, holding hands and looking unusually solemn. Father, Alistair stood up as I entered. We have news. I knew what I was going to hear before he even said the words. Kimberly glowed like a cat that had gotten to the cream. Kimberly and I are engaged, Alistair announced. I proposed to her today at lunch. I looked at Kimberly's hand. A diamond ring glittered on her finger, a massive, obviously expensive ring. Too expensive for Alistair's salary. Congratulations, I tried to make my voice sound sincere. It's unexpected. I know we haven't known each other long. Kimberly came over and took my hand. But when you find your soulmate, why wait? Life is so short. Yes, indeed, I released my hand gently. When do you plan to get married? In 2 months, Alistair answered. A small ceremony just for close friends and family. 2 months? I couldn't hide my surprise. That's very soon. Why put off happiness? Kimberly smiled. Besides, I've always dreamed of a winter wedding. We've already booked the Beverly Wilshire Hotel, Alistair added. Don't worry, I'll take care of all the expenses. I looked at him skeptically. I knew his financial situation better than anyone. Alistair earned a good salary at the company, but the Beverly Wilshire was one of the most expensive hotels in town. That's generous of you, I said neutrally. Actually, Alistair looked a little embarrassed. I was hoping the company might be able to help as part of my bonus for this year. That was it. I felt anger rising inside but held it back. We can discuss it tomorrow at the office, I said in a steady voice. Right now I'd like to rest. It had been a long day. I went up to my room feeling their stares at my back. I hardly slept that night, wondering how far Alistair was willing to go under the influence of this woman. Using company money for personal expenses? That was not like my son. The next morning I called Alistair into my office and closed the door. How much did you spend on the ring? I asked without preamble. Alistair tensed up. What does it matter? I had seen it. At least 50,000, if it's a real diamond. You don't have that kind of money. It's my business, he snapped. I took out a loan. At what interest rate? I continued. How are you going to pay it back? Your paycheck barely covers your regular expenses, not to mention the loan and the wedding at the Beverly Wilshire. That's why I'm asking for help, his voice grew quieter. I know you can afford it. Think of it as an investment in my future. Your future or Kimberly's ambition? I couldn't help myself. Are you sure this is your decision and not her manipulation? Alistair's face darkened with anger. That's it. You just can't accept that I found someone who loves me. You always thought I wasn't worthy of anything good. That's not true, and you know it, I tried to speak calmly. I just don't want you to be taken advantage of. Taken advantage of? Alistair almost shouted. Kimberly is the only person who truly believes in me. She sees my potential, not just my mistakes. She supports me, not criticizes my every move. She sees your bank account and connection to me. I raised my voice too. You're just a ticket to wealth and status for her. Enough. Alistair slammed his fist on the table. I'm not listening to this. If you can't accept my choice, that's your problem. But don't be surprised if I'm not at your funeral. He stormed out of the office, slamming the door so hard that a photograph fell off the wall. I picked it up, a 10-year-old snapshot of Alistair and me standing outside the new Thornhill Motors showroom in Santa Monica. We're not smiling, but we're standing shoulder to shoulder. It seemed like progress at the time. Alistair didn't come home that night, not the next day, not a week later. He took a leave of absence from the company, communicated it through Betty, and disappeared with Kimberly. I could have found them. I had the means and the connections, but I didn't. Perhaps the distance would help him come to his senses. 2 weeks later they returned, but not to my house, but to Kimberly's apartment. Alistair showed up at the office, nodded coldly to me in the hallway, and closed himself in his office. We didn't speak. The information about the upcoming wedding came to me from Betty, who had received the invitation. Mr. Thornhill, do you know that the wedding is set for December 15th? She asked cautiously. Did you receive the invitation? No, I answered briefly, but I am aware of the date. In fact, I did not receive an invitation. My own son had not invited me to his wedding. It hurt my pride, but it hurt even more to realize how far the rift between us had gone. By the end of October, with a month and a half to go, things had changed. Alistair showed up on my doorstep again, without Kimberly. We need to talk, he said when I opened the door. I led him into the study where we could talk privately. I'm listening, I said, sitting down in the chair. Alistair looked tense and a little embarrassed. I came to apologize, he began. I was overreacting. You're entitled to your opinion. I nodded, waiting for him to continue. I... Alistair took a deep breath. Kimberly and I would like you to be at our wedding. It'll be at the Beverly Wilshire, just like we planned. I remained silent. Something in his tone, in his posture, told me this wasn't a pure-hearted reconciliation. What else? I asked finally. Alistair swallowed nervously. We've run into some financial difficulties. The hotel is demanding full payment a month before the event, and the catering and decorators are also... How much? I interrupted. 250,000, Alistair answered, not looking me in the eye. But that includes everything. The ceremony, the reception, the photographer, the musicians. I held up my hand, stopping this stream of excuses. Are you apologizing to get money? No, Alistair exclaimed. I'm really sorry for the way we fought. Kimberly is too. She really wants you to be at our wedding. She even suggested that you walk her down the aisle since her father can't attend. I grinned. Of course Kimberly had suggested it. What better way to show all the guests her connection to her rich father-in-law? And when do you need the money? I asked. By next Wednesday, Alistair answered with relief in his voice, figuring I'd agreed. We can formalize it as a loan if you want. I'll pay it all back in due course. I looked at my son, trying to see him as the little boy who had once looked at me with adoration. That teenager who, despite the hurt and anger, still needed my approval. But all I saw was a young man manipulated by a woman with cold calculation. I'll think about it, I said finally. Give me a few days. Alistair nodded, clearly disappointed that he didn't get immediate approval. Of course. Thanks for listening. After he left, I sat in my office for a long time thinking, what should I do? Refuse and completely alienate my son? Or pay and become an accomplice in his exploitation by this predator? The next day, I asked Betty to put me through to the wedding planner at the Beverly Wilshire. A pleasant female voice answered after the first beep. Veronica Stiles, event planner. How may I help you? This is Sherman Thornhill, Alistair Thornhill's father. You're booked for my son's wedding on December 15th. Oh, Mr. Thornhill, her voice has warmed. Yes, of course, we have a beautiful ceremony planned. Miss Huxley has excellent taste, and everything will be exquisite. I don't doubt it, I replied dryly. Tell me, is it true that full payment is required a month in advance? Yes, that's our standard policy, Veronica confirmed. Full payment is due by November 15th. And what is the total amount? Pause. Mr. Thornhill, I'm not sure I can discuss financial details with anyone other than the clients named in the contract. I understand, I nodded, though she couldn't see it. Just confirm the figure for me. $250,000? Another pause. No, sir. The total contracted amount is $183,000. I thanked her and hung up. So Alistair had overestimated the amount. Or more likely, Kimberly was planning to pocket the difference. $67,000 wasn't a bad bonus before the wedding. 3 days later, Alistair showed up at my house again, this time with Kimberly. She was the epitome of filial deference. A modest smile, eyes downcast, quiet voice. Sherman, she began, I'm so glad we can finally talk. I feel terribly guilty about what happened between you and Alistair. You do? I didn't hide my skepticism. Of course you do. She looked up at me with eyes full of artificial tears. Family is the most important thing. I would never want to come between father and son. But somehow that's what happened, I remarked. It was a misunderstanding, Alistair intervened. We all overreacted, but now we're here to make it right. And to get $250,000, I added. Kimberly nudged Alistair discreetly with her elbow. Actually, he said, the final total is $183,000. I was speaking roughly, not knowing the exact figures. How convenient, I smiled. And what happens to the other $67,000 you were planning on getting? Kimberly's face froze for a moment before she regained her sweet smile. What do you mean? We just didn't know the exact amount. I spoke to Veronica Stiles, I said. She confirmed the value of the contract. Alistair looked confused. He turned to Kimberly. You told me 250. I rounded up, darling, she replied quickly. Including all the extras, the dress, the suit, the rings, the honeymoon, which aren't part of the hotel contract, I finished. But for some reason you asked me for that exact amount, without specifying the details. The tension in the room could have been cut with a knife. Alistair looked from me to Kimberly, clearly not knowing who to believe. Shidikachem, it's a misunderstanding. Kimberly put her hand on Alistair's shoulder. Let's not make a big deal out of it. What's important is that we want you to be a part of our special day, Sherman. You mean so much to Alistair, even though he doesn't always show it. I looked at this woman and saw right through her. Calculating, manipulative, willing to use any means to achieve her goals. And my son was too blinded to realize it. I'll pay for the wedding, I said finally. $183,000, direct to the hotel. Kimberly frowned slightly but quickly restored her smile. That's so kind of you, Sherman. We are immensely grateful. But I have a condition, I continued. I want to be a part of the planning. This is my only son's wedding, and I have a say in it. Now Kimberly was clearly worried. Of course, but, we already have a definite vision, and we've already coordinated many of the details with Veronica. I'm sure we can find a compromise, I smiled as fake as she did. After all, I'm just a sponsor, right? December in Beverly Hills usually meant cool sunshine, palm trees decorated with Christmas lights, and no snow, just the occasional drizzle that made the locals pull out the umbrellas they'd forgotten in their closets. But December 15th was surprisingly cold, with temperatures barely 10 degrees and heavy gray clouds covering the sky. I looked out my bedroom window and thought that the weather matched my mood. Over the past month and a half, I'd made good on my promise to pay for the wedding, participate in discussions with the organizers, and even attend a few meetings with Veronica Stiles. Kimberly didn't hide her irritation at my interference, but she couldn't openly object. I had my hand on my purse, and she understood that. Alistair hesitated between us, trying to please both his fiancée and his father. He looked haggard with shadows under his eyes and a nervous smile that appeared whenever Kimberly and I were in the same room. I almost felt sorry for him, but I firmly believed I was doing the right thing, giving him one last chance to see the true face of this woman. On the day of the wedding, I woke up at first light. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 in the afternoon, but I knew I would need time for what I had planned. After breakfast, I called my main car dealership. Everything is ready, Mr. Thornhill, the manager informed me. The car will be delivered to the back entrance of the hotel at 2 o'clock, as you requested. Make sure it's in perfect condition, I emphasized every word. Full diagnostics, full tank, all the paperwork's ready. Of course, sir, we double-checked everything. It's the best one we've had in years. I nodded in satisfaction. The latest model Porsche 911 Turbo S, metallic silver with black leather interior, had been Alistair's dream since he'd first seen it at the Los Angeles Auto Show last year. I remembered how his eyes lit up when he got behind the wheel on the test drive. One day, he said then, I'm going to drive one of these. I decided to make that someday today. Despite our differences, Alistair was still my son, and I wanted to give him a gift he would truly appreciate. Perhaps it was also my way of making amends for my years of absence from his life, or maybe a last-ditch effort to show him that I still cared for him, even if I didn't approve of his choices. At noon, I started getting ready, picked out the dark blue suit Elaine had once called my lucky suit, tied the tie Alistair had given me for my 60th birthday, the only gift from him in years that hadn't been picked out by the secretary or anyone else in the office. I wanted him to notice that detail. At exactly 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I left the house. Esther walked me to the door. Everything will be all right, Mr. Thornhill, she said, adjusting my tie with a motherly gesture. Mr. Alistair will understand that you have always wished him nothing but the best. I nodded gratefully, not sure I could speak without betraying my excitement. At this moment, I felt Elaine's absence particularly keenly. She should have been here beside me, proud of our son, helping him make the right choices. Maybe things would have turned out differently with her. The driver drove me to a car dealership on Sunset Boulevard, where a brand new Porsche was waiting for me. The metallic silver shone in the winter sun, peeking out from behind the clouds. It had a huge custom-made red bow on the roof, the kind you couldn't buy in a regular store. Beautiful car, sir, said the manager, handing me the keys. Mr. Alistair will be delighted. I got behind the wheel, feeling the familiar pleasure of the smell of new leather and the shine of chrome. The car started gently, enjoying the smoothness of the ride and the power under the hood. Even at my age, after so many years in the car business, a new car was still awe-inspiring, especially one like this. The drive to the Beverly Wilshire took about 30 minutes. I drove slowly, obeying all the rules, not wanting to take any chances with such valuable cargo. I parked at the main entrance, where the first guests were already gathering, mostly Alistair's colleagues from the company and a few of Kimberly's friends I'd met at the pre-wedding dinner. I left the keys in the car, asking the valet not to touch it, explaining that it was a wedding gift. I put a card on the windshield that read, "For Alistair and Kimberly," and headed for the hotel entrance. The lobby of the Beverly Wilshire was decorated with white lilies and roses. Kimberly's choice, of course. Elegant but impersonal, like everything she favored. The guest reception desk was located at the entrance to the banquet hall. Behind it sat a young woman in a slinky black dress, obviously a friend of Kimberly's, whom I'd seen a couple times. Dash Sherman Thornhill, I introduced myself, the groom's father. She looked over the list and frowned. "Excuse me, Mr. Thornhill, I need to clarify something." "Just a moment." She stood up and quickly disappeared behind the banquet hall doors. I waited patiently, looking at the other guests arriving in groups and pairs. They were all dressed in the latest fashions, holding elegantly wrapped gifts and envelopes. A few minutes later, the door opened again, and instead of the girl in black, Kimberly appeared. She was dressed in a simple white dress, obviously not a wedding dress, but formal enough for pre-wedding chores. Her hair was styled in an elaborate updo, and her makeup was flawless despite the early hour. "Sherman," her voice sounded strained. "I didn't expect to see you so early. I came to help," I answered neutrally. "I paid for this event, after all." Her eyes narrowed for a moment, but she quickly restored her fake smile. "Of course, we are very grateful for your financial support, but everything is already organized. You have nothing to worry about." I noticed the way she looked me over, lingering on my empty hands. "You, didn't bring a gift?" she asked with a casualness. "A gift?" I acted surprised. "Isn't paying for the whole wedding a gift?" Kimberly stared at me for a few seconds as if she couldn't believe her ears. Then she said quietly but clearly, "It's customary for us to bring gifts to weddings, even from our closest relatives." Don't worry," I said calmly. "I have something for Alistair." "You do?" She looked unconvinced. "And where is this gift?" "You'll see in due time," I smiled, minus surprise. Kimberly pressed her lips together. "Sherman, I must insist. If you don't have a gift to put on the table with the others—" At that moment, Veronica Stiles, the wedding planner, came over with a clipboard in hand. "Ms. Huxley, we need to go over the final details on the music," she began, then noticed me. "Oh, Mr. Thornhill, it's good to see you. Everything is ready as we discussed." Kimberly gave her an annoyed look. "Veronica, not now. I have an important conversation with Alistair's father." "I'm sorry." Veronica backed away, but I noticed her confusion. "Were you talking about some kind of conversation, Kimberly?" I asked innocently. "Yes." She lowered her voice, looking back at the arriving guests. "Sherman, I don't mean to be rude, but we have certain traditions. Gifts are an important part of the wedding ritual. They symbolize the couple's blessing and contribution to their future." "I see," I nodded. "And you don't think my $183,000 isn't symbolic enough?" "It's not about the money." Her voice was even quieter, but her tone was steely. "It's about respect for tradition and for Alistair and me." I saw the door of the banquet hall open behind her, and Alistair appeared. He was already in part of his wedding suit, white shirt and dark pants, but no jacket or tie. He spotted us and headed in our direction, clearly concerned. Dad?" He looked surprised. "Are you here already?" "I got here early," I answered. "I wanted to make sure everything was going according to plan." Alistair looked at Kimberly, noticing her tense expression. "What's going on?" "Nothing, darling," she answered quickly. "I was just explaining to your father some details of our ceremony." "Kimberly is worried that I didn't bring a gift," I added, looking directly at my son. Alistair blushed with embarrassment. "Father, that's not what she meant. Of course, you've already done more than enough by paying for the wedding." "No, Alistair," Kimberly interrupted him. "It's not about the money, it's about the gesture, the symbol. All the other guests will bring gifts. It's part of the tradition. By now, our conversation had attracted the attention of several guests who were waiting to check in. They tried not to look in our direction, but it was obvious they were listening. Kimberly noticed this and seemed to make a decision. She straightened up, squared her shoulders, and spoke loud enough to be heard by those around her. Sherman, I respect you as Alistair's father and as the man who helped organize this day. But if you didn't bring a gift like all the other guests, I'm afraid I can't allow you to attend the ceremony. There was silence in the hall. All eyes were on the three of us. Alistair looked as if he'd been punched. Kimberly, he exclaimed. You can't. I can and I must, she cut him off. This is our wedding, Alistair. Our day. And I won't let anyone, not even your father, break our traditions. She turned to me. You're not allowed in without a gift, Sherman. That is my final word. I stared at her, feeling a wave of anger and disgust rise inside me. Not at her. I'd known who she was for a long time, at the situation, to the fact that my son was willing to stand by this woman and allow her to publicly humiliate his father. I shifted my gaze to Alistair, expecting him to say something, to stop her, to take my side. But he remained silent, his head down, unable to meet my gaze. At that moment, I realized I'd lost. Not Kimberly, she was the one I'd never tried to prove anything to. I had lost the battle for my son. He had made his choice, and that choice was not in my favor. I didn't argue. I didn't explain about the Porsche out front. I didn't talk about my feelings or the mistake he was making. I just nodded, turned, and walked toward the exit. Behind me, there were whispers from the guests and the muffled voice of Alistair saying something to Kimberly. As I walked out of the hotel, I took a deep breath of the cold December air. The silver Porsche was still parked out front, attracting admiring glances from passing guests. The red bow on the roof fluttered in the light wind. I could get in the car and drive away, take back the gift that had turned out to be so unnecessary, but instead I crossed the street, sat on a bench in the small square across from the hotel, and waited. I knew that sooner or later someone would notice the card on the windshield. Someone would tell Kimberly about the luxury car waiting for the newlyweds, and I wanted to see her reaction. The wait wasn't long. About 20 minutes later, the same girl in the black dress who had been sitting at the check-in desk came running out of the hotel door. She walked over to the Porsche, read the card, and covering her mouth with her hand, rushed back into the hotel. After a few more minutes, Kimberly showed up. She was already in her wedding dress, a tight, pearl-embroidered gown with a long train, which she picked up carelessly as she hurried to the car. Alistair followed her, still without his jacket. I watched Kimberly walk up to the Porsche, her face changing as she read the card. She turned to Alistair, saying something quickly. He walked over, read it too, and froze as if struck by thunder. Then they both started looking around, obviously looking for me. Kimberly said something to the valet, pointing to the car in the hotel. He shrugged, apparently explaining that I'd asked him not to touch the car. Kimberly looked confused and upset. She kept looking around, then pulled out her cell phone and seemingly dialed my number. I could feel the phone vibrating in my pocket, but I didn't answer it. Alistair was standing next to the car with his hand on the roof, with an expression of deep sadness on his face. He knew I was somewhere nearby, watching them. He even looked toward the public garden, but didn't see me among the trees. Kimberly seemed to have made up her mind. She spoke to Alistair again, gesturing toward the hotel and the car. He shook his head, but she insisted. Finally, he reluctantly nodded. They returned to the hotel, and I knew the search was about to begin. Kimberly would send her girlfriends and assistant organizers to look for me all over the building and the surrounding area. She would realize the mistake she had made and would be desperate to make things right. Not because of me, because of the car that cost more than the entire wedding. I pulled out my phone, saw 3 missed calls from Alistair and 2 from an unknown number, probably Kimberly. I locked the screen and contemplated my next move. Honestly, I hadn't planned what to do next. I'd hoped that the gift would melt the ice between us, that Alistair would appreciate my gesture, and maybe start to see Kimberly in her true light. But the scene in the hall changed everything. I saw what I was to them, just a wallet, a sponsor whose presence was tolerated only because of money, and I also saw that my son didn't have the strength to protect me. He stood next to the woman who had publicly humiliated his father and remained silent. That was the most painful thing of all. The phone vibrated again. This time I answered without looking at the screen. Minus Sherman Thornhill. Father! Alistair's voice sounded desperate. Where are you? We've been looking for you everywhere. I'm gone, I answered calmly. Just as your fiancé asked. Father, please, he almost begged. It was a misunderstanding. Kimberly didn't know about the car. She's really excited about the wedding. You know how stressful it is. I know what she said and how you reacted, I interrupted. That's enough. Come back, please, he sounded genuinely hurt. We can talk this through. Kimberly wants to apologize. Of course she does, I grinned. Now that she's seen the Porsche. Dad, that's not true. The keys are in the car, I said. All the papers are in the glove compartment. The car's yours, you can have it. Consider it my wedding present. I don't want a car, Alistair's voice trembled. I want my father to be at my wedding. I closed my eyes, feeling something break inside me. Part of me wanted to go back, to hug my son, to tell him everything would be okay. But the other part, the stronger part, knew that would be a lie. Nothing would be okay as long as this woman was in his life. I'm sorry, Alistair, I said quietly. I'm not coming. There was silence. Then I heard another voice, Kimberly, speaking somewhere near Alistair. Give me the phone. I'll talk to him. No. Alistair's voice sounded firm, which surprised me. This is between me and my father. Alistair, I intervened. Think again. Are you sure you want this marriage? You've seen the way she acts when she thinks she can get something. You've seen her true colors. I love her, Father, he replied after a pause, and she loves me. What happened today was just a misunderstanding. I shook my head, though he couldn't see it. If that's what you think, then I have nothing to add. Father, please. The wedding is off, Alistair, I said firmly. What? He sounded shocked. You can't. I can. I cut him off. I paid for this event, and I'm canceling it. Tell Veronica to contact me to settle the details. I clicked off without waiting for a response, then turned the phone off completely, knowing he would call back. Sitting on a bench in the public garden across from the Beverly Wilshire, I watched Alistair walk out of the hotel alone, without Kimberly. He stood at the entrance looking around, obviously looking for me. Then he walked slowly over to the Porsche, ran his hand over the hood as if saying goodbye, and walked back to the hotel. I knew it was about to get chaotic. Kimberly would be furious, the guests confused, the organizers panicked. But it didn't concern me anymore. I had made my choice, just as Alistair had made his. I didn't get home until the evening. For several hours I just wandered around Beverly Hills, not noticing neither passers-by, nor store windows, nor streets decorated for Christmas. The same thoughts, the same scenes kept running through my mind. Kimberly saying, "You can't come in without a present." Alistair standing next to me with his head down, not saying a word in my defense. Then their faces when they saw the Porsche. Shock, disbelief, and most disgusting of all, the instant calculation in Kimberly's eyes. As if she'd instantly assessed the value of the car and figured out how she could fix the situation so as not to lose such a generous gift. Esther met me at the door with a concerned face. Mr. Thornhill, what's the matter? Mr. Alistair called several times asking about you. He seemed very upset. There's not going to be a wedding, Esther, I said, taking off my coat. At least not today, and not on my terms. She looked at me carefully but didn't ask any questions, for which I was grateful. Instead, she said, I'll make you some tea. And maybe a sandwich? You haven't eaten anything all day. I nodded, suddenly feeling tired and hungry. I went up to my office, sat down in a chair by the window, and turned on my phone. It immediately started vibrating with the accumulation of notifications. 17 missed calls from Alistair, 5 from Kimberly, 3 from Veronica Stiles, and even 1 from Betty at the office. 22 voicemail messages and 34 text messages. I put the phone away, not wanting to deal with all of that right now. The first message I read was from Alistair. Dad, please call me back. We need to talk. The second was from Kimberly. Sherman, this is a terrible misunderstanding. I never meant to offend you. Please come back. Let's talk about this. And so on. Variations on the same theme, growing more desperate with each message. Esther brought tea and a sandwich, placing the tray on the table next to me. Your phone won't stop ringing, she said. Let it ring, I replied, sipping my hot tea. I'm not ready to talk to any of them. What happened if it's not a secret? Esther asked cautiously. She had been with me so long she had a right to know. I told her everything. About the gift, about Kimberly's words, about Alistair's silence, about my decision to call off the wedding. She thought I didn't bring the gift, Esther. I grinned bitterly. After everything I'd done, after all the money I'd put into this damn wedding, she dared to make me look like that in front of all those people. And Alistair just stood there and let her do it. Esther shook her head. Mr. Alistair had always been weak-willed when it came to women. Remember that girl Tracy he dated in college? She made him miss your birthday because she wanted to go to a concert. I nodded, remembering. I'd been disappointed then too, but I'd written it off as a teenage crush. Now Alistair was 35, a grown man who should be able to prioritize. Mr. Thornhill? Esther continued after a pause. I know it's none of my business, but maybe you should talk to him. Not to her, of course, but to Mr. Alistair. He's your son, no matter what. I looked at her with gratitude for her concern, but shook my head. Not now, Esther. I need time to think things over, to decide what to do next. She nodded understandingly and walked out, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I spent a sleepless night tossing and turning in bed, replaying the events of the last few months in my head. How Kimberly had come into our lives, how quickly she had bewitched Alistair, how skillfully she had manipulated him and me, how I'd seen it all but couldn't prevent it. Toward morning, I made a decision, not just to sever all contact with Kimberly, that was obvious, but to reevaluate my relationship with Alistair. If he'd chosen her, if he was willing to stand by her while she humiliated his father, then all these years later I'd been right. There had never been a real connection between us. I was just a source of funding for him, a ticket to a comfortable life. Maybe it was my fault. Maybe I really didn't know how to be a father, didn't know how to show my love other than through material things. But that didn't matter now. All that mattered was the choice he made yesterday in the lobby of the Beverly Wilshire. I went down to breakfast with the firm intention of ending this chapter of my life and beginning a new one. Esther, as always, was already cooking in the kitchen, filling the house with the aroma of fresh coffee and toast. Good morning, Mr. Thornhill, she greeted me. How are you feeling? Better, Esther, I answered, and it was true. Certainty, even painful certainty, is always better than doubt. I shall work from home today. Don't put me through to anyone but Betty at the office, not even to Mr. Alistair? She asked cautiously. Especially with him. I took a cup of coffee and toast. I'll decide for myself when I'm ready to talk to him. After breakfast, I shut myself in my office and started working, reviewing reports, answering emails, planning strategy for the next quarter. Work had always been my refuge, a way to take my mind off my personal problems. Today it seemed especially important, a reminder that I had a life outside of my relationship with my son, a business I'd built from the ground up that was thriving because of my efforts. Around noon, Betty called. Mr. Thornhill, there's a Mr. Alistair here asking for you. It's the third time he's come in, looking very upset. I sighed. This conversation was bound to happen sooner or later. Tell him I'll pick up the phone if he calls my home number in an hour. Exactly 1 hour later, the office phone rang. I picked up after the third ring. Minus Sherman Thornhill. Father, Alistair's voice sounded exhausted. Finally. I've been trying to reach you all yesterday and this morning. I know, I answered neutrally. I've seen your calls. Why didn't you answer? I could hear the resentment in his voice. Kimberly and I were in a panic. The guests were waiting. The organizers didn't know what to do. I told you clearly on the phone that the wedding was canceled, I interrupted. What did you expect? I thought, he hesitated. I thought you'd just be upset, that you'd cool down and come back. And what? I asked. What was I supposed to do? Walk into the hall where your fiancé had just publicly humiliated me and pretend nothing happened? Kimberly didn't mean to humiliate you, Alistair objected. She was very nervous about the wedding. You know how stressful it is for a bride. Don't defend her, Alistair. My voice grew harsher. You were there. You heard what she said, and you saw the car I brought as a gift. There was silence on the other end of the line. Yes, he said quietly at last. I did. It's, it's a very generous gift, Father. Thank you. Don't thank me, I cut him off. I'm not sure you deserve it. Father, please, he said, a pleading tone in his voice. Let's meet and talk. I'll come to you. Or we can meet somewhere in the city. No, I was firm. Anything that needed to be said could be said over the phone. Okay, he sighed. Then tell me, what should we do? How do we fix the situation? You can't fix the situation, Alistair, I said calmly but firmly. Oh, what happened yesterday only confirmed what I suspected from the beginning. Kimberly is only interested in money and status. She's using you to get to my fortune. That's not true, he exclaimed. She loves me. Maybe, I didn't argue, but not as much as she loves what you can give her. And yesterday you saw her true face. She paraded your father in front of the guests like some unwanted beggar because she thought I hadn't brought a gift expensive enough. And when she saw the Porsche, she changed her tone. Alistair was silent. I knew that my words were hitting the target, that somewhere deep inside he knew I was right. What do you want from me? He asked at last. I want you to make a choice, I said. It's either her or me. What? He seemed shocked. You can't ask me to do that. I can and I am. My voice was firm. I'm not going to pretend to approve of your relationship with this woman. I'm not going to sit by and watch her manipulate you, use you and humiliate me. Either you end your relationship with her, or you're no longer my son. Father, you don't understand, his voice shook. I love her. We were gonna get married. We have plans, dreams. Choose, Alistair. I was adamant. And remember that your choice will have consequences. If you choose her, you're no longer employed by the company. No financial support, no inheritance. You'll be on your own. And we'll see how long Kimberly's love will last when she realizes there will be no more money. You can't do that. There was fear in his voice now. It's blackmail. It's my right, I objected. It's my right to decide who I leave what I've earned. And it's my right to choose who I want to do business with. I'm your son, he exclaimed. Your flesh and blood. You can't just cut me out of your life. You cut me out of yours when you let that woman humiliate me in front of everyone. My voice shook, revealing the emotion I was trying to hide. When you stood there, silent, you made your choice. There was a heavy pause on the other end of the line. I heard Alistair's heavy breathing, imagined his face contorted with anger and pain. Part of me wanted to soften, to back down, to compromise, but I knew I had to be firm, for him, for myself, for our future. Father, he finally said, and his voice sounded surprisingly calm. I understand that you're upset. I understand that you're hurting, but you can't ask me to choose between the woman I love and my father. It's not fair. Life is rarely fair, Alistair, I replied. I thought you'd have realized that by now. Give me some time, he asked. I need to think, to talk to Kimberly. Sure, I agreed. Think about it all you want. But until you make a decision, you're suspended from the company, and all financial matters are frozen. What? He sounded shocked again. You can't. I can, I interrupted. I'm still the CEO and majority shareholder, and I've just decided to restructure. Your position is being temporarily abolished. That's illegal, he exclaimed. I'm going to sue. Try it. I couldn't hold back a bitter chuckle. Let's see what the court has to say about a manager who used corporate funds for personal expenses without proper approval. What are you talking about? His voice shook. The $53,000 you transferred from the company account to your personal account 3 weeks ago, I answered. The same money you used to buy the engagement ring and the down payment for the wedding. How do you... I know everything that goes on in my company, Alistair, I said. I just let it happen because I wanted to see how far you were willing to go. And now I know. There was a long pause. I could almost see Alistair trying to find a way out, to come up with an explanation, to salvage the situation. I was going to pay that money back, he said at last. It was a temporary loan. No board approval, no documentation, no interest, I listed. It's not a loan, Alistair. It's embezzlement. Are you really going to sue me? His voice sounded incredulous. Against your own son? I hope it won't come to that, I answered honestly. I hope you make the right decision. Father, he began again, and now there was a pleading tone in his voice. Please, let's meet. Let's talk in person. I'm sure we can find a solution that will suit everyone. My decision is final, Alistair, I said. It's either her or me. It's Kimberly or your place in the company and your inheritance. It's your choice. You can't do this to me. He sounded angry now. You can't control my life through money. I don't control your life, I countered. I'm giving you a choice, the freedom to choose. If you're so sure of your feelings for Kimberly and her feelings for you, choose her. Start from scratch, without my money, without my support. See how long your love lasts. You're a monster, Alistair exhaled. A cold, calculating monster. No wonder Mama was so unhappy with you. His words hit me like a physical blow. I was speechless for a moment, not expecting such an attack. You don't know what you're talking about, I said at last, trying to stay calm. Your mother loved me, and I loved her. No, Alistair sounded confident now, as if he'd found a weakness. You don't know how to love, Father. You only know how to possess, to control, to manipulate. You did it to Mom. Now you're trying to do it to me. But I won't let you. You don't own me. I took a deep breath, trying to contain the anger that was rising inside me. Alistair had been a child when Elaine died. He couldn't know what our relationship was like, but his words still hurt. Is this your final decision? I asked, already knowing the answer. Yes, he answered firmly. I choose Kimberly. I choose my life, my happiness, my future. Without your control. Good. I tried to make my voice sound nonchalant. As of this moment, you are no longer employed by Thornhill Motors. Your badge will be deactivated, your email will be blocked. You must vacate your office by the end of the week. Betty will contact you about severance pay and other formalities. Father, now the fear was back in his voice. Don't do this. Please. You've made your choice, Alistair, I replied. Now live with it. I hung up the phone without waiting for his answer. I sat in the chair staring at the phone, waiting for him to call back. But the phone was silent. I felt strangely empty, as if every emotion had been pulled out of me, leaving only an empty shell. There was no anger, no pain, no regret, just fatigue and a sense of finality, as if a door had closed, never to be opened again. I called Esther on the intercom. Bring me a whiskey, please, Ron, I asked, and connect me with Betty in the office. A few minutes later, Esther brought a glass of the amber liquid. She put it in front of me, looked at it carefully, and asked, Did you talk to Mr. Alistair? Yes, I answered, taking a sip. The whiskey burned my throat, but it was a pleasant sensation, a reminder that I was still alive, still feeling. He'd made his choice. Chose her. Esther nodded, not looking surprised. I'm sorry, Mr. Thornhill. You shouldn't be, I shook my head. Maybe it's better this way. Maybe now he'll grow up and learn to stand on his own 2 feet. Maybe, she agreed, though I could see that she didn't believe it any more than I did. The phone rang an internal line this time. I picked it up. Mr. Thornhill. Betty's voice sounded concerned. You wanted to speak to me? Yes, Betty. I pulled myself together, back into businessman, executive mode. I have some orders to fulfill immediately. I didn't get home until the evening. For several hours I just wandered around Beverly Hills, not noticing neither passers-by, nor store windows, nor streets decorated for Christmas. The same thoughts, the same scenes kept running through my mind. Kimberly saying, You can't come in without a present. Alistair standing next to me with his head down, not saying a word in my defense. Then their faces when they saw the Porsche. Shock, disbelief, and most disgusting of all, the instant calculation in Kimberly's eyes, as if she'd instantly assessed the value of the car and figured out how she could fix the situation so as not to lose such a generous gift. Esther met me at the door with a concerned face. Mr. Thornhill, what's the matter? Mr. Alistair called several times asking about you. He seemed very upset. There's not going to be a wedding, Esther, I said, taking off my coat. At least not today and not on my terms. She looked at me carefully but didn't ask any questions, for which I was grateful. Instead, she said, I'll make you some tea and maybe a sandwich. You haven't eaten anything all day." I nodded, suddenly feeling tired and hungry. I went up to my office, sat down in a chair by the window, and turned on my phone. It immediately started vibrating with the accumulation of notifications. 17 missed calls from Alistair, 5 from Kimberly, 3 from Veronica Stiles, and even 1 from Betty at the office. 22 voicemail messages and 34 text messages. I put the phone away, not wanting to deal with all of that right now. The first message I read was from Alistair. "Dad, please call me back. We need to talk." The second was from Kimberly. "Sherman, this is a terrible misunderstanding. I never meant to offend you. Please come back. Let's talk about this." And so on. Variations on the same theme, growing more desperate with each message. Esther brought tea and a sandwich, placing the tray on the table next to me. "Your phone won't stop ringing," she said. "Let it ring," I replied, sipping my hot tea. "I'm not ready to talk to any of them." "What happened if it's not a secret?" Esther asked cautiously. She had been with me so long she had a right to know. I told her everything. About the gift, about Kimberly's words, about Alistair's silence, about my decision to call off the wedding. She thought I didn't bring the gift, Esther. I grinned bitterly. After everything I'd done, after all the money I'd put into this damn wedding, she dared to make me look like that in front of all those people. And Alistair just stood there and let her do it. Esther shook her head. Mr. Alistair had always been weak-willed when it came to women. "Remember that girl Tracy he dated in college? She made him miss your birthday because she wanted to go to a concert." I nodded, remembering. I'd been disappointed then too, but I'd written it off as a teenage crush. Now Alistair was 35, a grown man who should be able to prioritize. Mr. Thornhill, Esther continued after a pause, "I know it's none of my business, but maybe you should talk to him. Not to her, of course, but to Mr. Alistair. He's your son, no matter what." I looked at her with gratitude for her concern, but shook my head. "Not now, Esther. I need time to think things over, to decide what to do next." She nodded understandingly and walked out, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I spent a sleepless night tossing and turning in bed, replaying the events of the last few months in my head. How Kimberly had come into our lives, how quickly she had bewitched Alistair, how skillfully she had manipulated him and me, how I'd seen it all but couldn't prevent it. Toward morning, I made a decision, not just to sever all contact with Kimberly, that was obvious, but to reevaluate my relationship with Alistair. If he'd chosen her, if he was willing to stand by her while she humiliated his father, then all these years later, I'd been right. There had never been a real connection between us. I was just a source of funding for him, a ticket to a comfortable life. On Monday, I called Betty and asked her to organize a meeting of department heads. "We need to redistribute Alistair's responsibilities," I told her. "He's no longer with the company." Betty looked at me puzzled. Mr. Thornhill, are you sure? Mr. Alistair was doing such a good job with the key accounts." "I'm sure," I replied firmly. "Find his job description in the archives and divide the task between Thomas in sales and Richard in customer service. If necessary, we'll hire a new person." Betty nodded, though I could see she didn't approve of my decision. She'd grown attached to Alistair over the years, watched him grow up, and now probably thought I was an abusive father who'd kicked his son out of the family business because of a personal grudge. If only she knew the whole story. On Tuesday, my sister Helen, the only surviving close relative besides Alistair, called. She lived in Portland, and we rarely saw each other and called once a month at most. But somehow the news of what happened at the failed wedding reached her. "Sherman, what's going on over there?" she asked instead of greeting. "Alistair called me, saying something about you canceling his wedding and kicking him out of the company." I sighed. Of course Alistair had gone to his aunt, looking for allies, trying to put pressure on me through other people. "It's a long story, Helen," I replied, "and I'm not sure I want to discuss it over the phone." "Then fly to Portland," she suggested. "Or I'll fly to Los Angeles." "But we need to talk, Sherman. Alistair is your only son. You can't just cut him out of your life." "I didn't cut him out," I countered. "He made a choice. He chose the woman who publicly humiliated me. He told me that, Helen's voice softened. And believe me, I don't approve of that girl's behavior. But can't you forgive one mistake? Haven't you ever made a mistake? It's not about one mistake. I was starting to get annoyed. It's about who she is, what she's doing to him, how she's manipulating him and using him to access my money. Sherman, Helen sighed, I know that since Elaine's death, you've become cautious in your relationships. But don't project your fears onto Alistair's relationship. If he loves this girl, he thinks he does, I interrupted. And I don't care. I gave him a choice, either her or his place in the company and the inheritance. He chose her. Now he can live with the consequences. You're a cruel man, Sherman. Helen sounded disappointed. And stubborn, like your father. The mention of my father hurt me. Old Thornhill was a tyrant who controlled every aspect of his children's lives, never showed affection, and believed his word was law. I've spent my life trying not to be like him. I'm not my father, I said firmly. I don't control Alistair's life. I give him a choice, the freedom to choose. It's not a choice, Sherman, Helen objected. It's an ultimatum. You're putting him in an impossible position. If her love is real, I replied, then losing the inheritance won't be a problem. They'll be happy together, without my money. And if she leaves him when she realizes there will be no money? Helen asked. What then? Will you take him back? Or will you gloat, saying, I warned you? I wondered. Honestly, I didn't know the answer to that question. Part of me wanted Kimberly to show her true colors, to dump Alistair as soon as she realized he was cut off from my fortune. But the other part was afraid of what it would do to my son. His pride, his self-esteem, his ability to trust people. I don't know, Helen, I answered honestly. I'll decide when it happens. If it happens. Sherman, my sister's voice became pleading, please think again. Talk to Alistair. Meet with him. Listen to him. Don't destroy your family over one incident. I'll think about it, I said, even though I knew I wasn't likely to change my mind. Thanks for calling, Helen. On Wednesday, Frank Pearson, our family lawyer who had been handling the Thornhill cases for over 20 years, called. Sherman, he began after a brief greeting, I received a strange call from Alistair. He asked me about your will, how it might be changed and my rights as heir. I didn't discuss the details with him, of course, but I thought I should let you know. Thank you, Frank, I replied. I appreciate your loyalty. Yes, Alistair and I have had a disagreement. In fact, I was planning to contact you about changing the will. I understand. There was no surprise in Frank's voice. He'd seen enough family dramas over the years. When do you want to meet? Would tomorrow be okay, I asked. Say 2 o'clock in the afternoon in your office? I'll make time, he replied. But Sherman, let me give you some advice. Not as a lawyer, but as a friend. Don't make hasty decisions that you may regret. Family conflicts tend to resolve themselves over time. Not this one, I said firmly. I'll see you tomorrow, Frank. On Thursday at 2 o'clock sharp, I entered Pearson's elegant office on the 16th floor of a building in downtown Los Angeles. Frank met me in the reception area, ushered me into his office overlooking the skyscrapers of the business district. You look tired, Sherman, he said as we sat down. Rough week? Tough month, I replied. But I don't want to waste your time complaining. Let's get down to business. Frank nodded and opened the folder that lay in front of him. Your current will leave virtually the entire estate to Alistair, he began. 90% of the shares in Thornhill Motors, the house in Beverly Hills, other real estate, bank accounts, investments. The remaining 10% distributed to charitable organizations and small amounts for Esther and a few other longtime employees. It had been drawn up 5 years ago and hadn't been revised since. I nodded, remembering the day I signed those documents. It had seemed simple and clear then. Of course, my only son should inherit everything I had built. Despite our differences, despite his inability to take initiative in business, despite the strain on our relationship, he was my blood, an extension of myself, the last Thornhill. I want to change that, I said firmly. Alistair should get nothing. Frank raised his eyebrows. Nothing? That's a radical change, Sherman. Are you sure about it? Absolutely. I didn't let doubt creep into my voice. He made his choice. Chose a woman who's only interested in my money over my relationship with him. I see, Frank made a note in his notebook. In that case, we need to discuss a new distribution of assets. Who do you want to leave your assets to? That question caught me off guard, though I should have expected it. To whom did I want to leave everything I'd earned from 50 years of hard work? I had no other children. My parents were long dead. Helen was well off and had never been interested in the automobile business. Yeah, I'm not sure, I admitted. Maybe we should increase the percentage of charitable organizations and make sure Esther has a comfortable old age. She deserves it. That's reasonable, Frank nodded. But what about the fixed assets? Thornhill Motors is a significant part of your fortune. Who will run the company after you? I wondered. I'd never considered the possibility of anyone other than Alistair running the company after me. Despite his shortcomings, he knew the business inside out, had grown up watching it develop, understood its principles and values. Maybe we could sell the company after I'm dead, I suggested tentatively. Distribute the proceeds to charitable organizations? That's an option, Frank agreed. But are you sure you want your life's work to fall into the wrong hands? Maybe you should consider handing over management to one of your top managers. Someone you trust? Someone who shares your vision? I shook my head. I haven't thought about that, Frank. I need time to think it over. I'll wait, sure now. Of course, he closed the folder. I'll prepare a preliminary draft of a new will with increased shares for the charities in Esther. We'll leave the question of the company open until you make a decision. But Sherman, he looked me straight in the eye, I would recommend that you take your time with the final changes. Give yourself and Alistair time to cool down. Family conflicts often seem insurmountable in the midst of emotion, but over time... This isn't an ordinary conflict, Frank, I interrupted. It's a matter of principle. I understand, he nodded, but principles sometimes cost too much, especially when it comes to an only son. Time has a strange way of healing and corroding at the same time. In the 3 months since the failed wedding, my wound had crusted over, but the pain still throbbed beneath it. February in Los Angeles was unusually rainy. The gray skies, lingering showers, and early twilight all matched my mood. I was working more than usual, arriving at the office first and leaving last, spending the weekend reviewing reports and planning strategy for the next quarter. Thornhill Motors was thriving. Sales were up, customers were happy, competitors were nervous. I should have been happy, but all I felt was emptiness. I hadn't heard from Alistair. He hadn't called, written, or tried to meet since our last conversation. Betty occasionally mentioned him, saying that clients asked where he'd disappeared to, but I answered evasively, and she stopped bringing it up. On February 15th, as I was going through the morning mail in my office, Betty entered with an unusual expression on her face, a mixture of concern and indecision. Mr. Thornhill, she began cautiously. I thought you might like to see this. She placed a glossy magazine in front of me, one of those magazines that covered the social life of Los Angeles. The magazine was open to a page with the headline, Private Wedding of the Year. Alistair and Kimberly were standing there in a photo that took up half the spread, he in a dark suit, she in an elegant white dress, much more modest than the one she'd chosen for the failed ceremony at the Beverly Wilshire. I stared at the photo, unable to believe my eyes. They'd gotten married after all. Without me, without my blessing, without my money. When did this happen? I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. According to the article, a week ago, Betty replied. A small ceremony in Malibu, only 20 guests. I ran my eyes over the text. The heir to the Thornhill automobile empire and prominent PR pro Kimberly Huxley exchange vows at sunset, surrounded by their closest friends and family. My sister Helen was mentioned among the guests, so she knew and didn't tell me. Well, that's another betrayal in the books. Thank you, Betty. I closed the magazine and pushed it away. Anything else? No, Mr. Thornhill, she paused. If you want to talk. I don't, I said. I have a meeting with the suppliers in an hour. Could you get me the latest imports from Germany, please? She nodded and walked out, leaving me alone with the news, which, strangely enough, did not cause the expected storm of emotions. I felt numb rather than hurt or anger. Perhaps I had been preparing for this moment for too long, Or perhaps, deep down, I had always known that Alistair would not back down. That evening, as I was about to leave the office, Richard Coleman, head of customer service and one of the most loyal employees of the company, came in to see me. Mr. Thornhill, he began after a brief knock, may I speak to you about something delicate? I nodded, sensing it would be about Alistair. I met with Pacific Luxury Cars today, Richard said, sitting down across from me. It's a new company that plans to open a premium car dealership in West Hollywood. So, I asked, even though I already knew where he was going with this. One of the founders of this company is Mr. Alistair Thornhill. Richard looked at me carefully, gauging my reaction. They've already rented space on Sunset Boulevard, 2 blocks from our salon. They plan to open in a month. I felt something inside me clench. Alistair hadn't just married against my will. He'd decided to become my competitor, to challenge my life's work. They tried to poach me, Richard continued. They offered me the position of director of customer service at a salary 30% higher than my current salary. And what did you say? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. I said no, of course. Richard looked almost insulted. I've been with you for 12 years, Mr. Thornhill. My loyalty is not for sale. I appreciate that, Richard. I nodded. Have any of our other employees received similar offers? As far as I know, they've contacted Jason in marketing and Laura in finance, he replied. I'm not sure if they responded. Thanks for the information. I stood up, signaling that the conversation was over. I'll look into it. After Richard left, I stood at the window for a long time, looking at the lights of the evening city. So Alistair had decided to throw down the gauntlet to me, use everything he'd learned at Thornhill Motors against me, poach my staff, copy my business model, maybe even try to steal my customers. Part of me felt a kind of twisted pride. At last, my son was taking initiative, showing that he had my spirit, my entrepreneurial spirit. But the other, larger part felt it as a betrayal, a spit in the face. He didn't just reject my offer to return, he chose to attack me on my own turf. The next morning, I called Thomas Brennan, the head of sales, to my office. Thomas, I began without preamble. What do you know about Pacific Luxury Cars? He tensed, and I realized he knew too. A new company, he answered cautiously. They're planning to open a salon on Sunset Boulevard. One of the founders is your son. Who is the other founder? I asked, even though I already knew. As far as I know, his wife, Kimberly Thornhill, Thomas faltered. Huxley's ex. Of course. Who else? I wonder where they got the money to rent the space on Sunset Boulevard and the startup capital for the business. Alistair got a nice severance package when he left the company, but not enough to open a premium car dealership. I decided it was time to take action. Over the next week, I gathered all the information I could about Pacific Luxury Cars. It turned out that Alistair had indeed used his last name to negotiate contracts with manufacturers. Several of the preliminary agreements even referred to him as a representative of Thornhill Motors, which was a blatant lie. He also contacted several of our suppliers, offering them better terms, but not mentioning that he no longer worked for my company. I called Frank Pearson, our corporate lawyer. Frank, I said as he entered my office, I need your help. Alistair is opening a competing business and is using information he gained while working at Thornhill Motors. I want you to draft a cease and desist letter. Sherman, Frank looked worried. Are you sure you want to go down this road? Filing a lawsuit against your own son? He's left me no choice, I replied firmly. He's not just competing with me, he's using confidential company information. It's illegal. I'll draw up the papers, Frank sighed. But Sherman, maybe we should talk to him first. Try to resolve this peacefully. It's too late for talking, I cut him off. He's made his choice. Frank had prepared not only a cease and desist letter, but also a lawsuit for breach of confidentiality and unfair competition. I signed both documents without hesitation. Let Alistair realize that business is not a game, and his actions have consequences. 3 days after sending the documents to Alistair, I got a call from Helen. What are you doing, Sherman? She started without greeting. Sue your own son. He broke the law, Helen, I replied calmly. He used confidential company information, posed as a representative of Thornhill Motors. when he's no longer. He's your son, Dash, she exclaimed. Your flesh and blood. Is business more important to you than family? It's not a matter of priorities, I argued. It's a matter of principle. Alistair must realize that his actions have consequences. You're too hard, Sherman. She sounded disappointed. I was at their wedding, you know. A small, humble ceremony. Alistair looked happy, despite all the difficulties. And Kimberly. She's not what you think she is. She really loves him. So much so that she pushes him to commit illegal acts against his own father? I grinned. I'm sorry, Helen, but I don't believe she's sincere. You only see what you want to see, she sighed. It's always been that way. I can't change your mind, but please think again before you ruin your son's life out of pride and stubbornness. She hung up without waiting for my response. At the beginning of March, we received an answer to our lawsuit. Alistair hired a good lawyer, Marcus Jenkins, a well-known specialist in corporate law. They admitted no wrongdoing and claimed that all of Alistair's actions were legal and ethical. A legal battle began that promised to be long and messy. Each day brought new documents, new statements, new accusations. I plunged headlong into the process, almost forgetting about the company itself. Betty worried, seeing how exhausted I was, but I brushed off her concerns. By mid-March, it was clear that my actions had achieved their goal. Pacific Luxury Cars was experiencing difficulties. Several manufacturers had withdrawn their preliminary agreements upon learning of the lawsuit. Banks were denying loans. Potential employees didn't want to get involved with a litigious company. I used all my connections, all my influence, to undermine Alistair's endeavor. I called partners, met with suppliers, made it clear that working with Pacific Luxury Cars meant losing contracts with Thornhill Motors. It wasn't the cleanest of tactics, but I was prepared to do anything to protect my business and, as I convinced myself, to save Alistair from the disaster Kimberly was dragging him into. In late March, Marcus Jenkins, Alistair's lawyer, came to my office out of the blue. Dash, Mr. Thornhill, he began, sitting across from me. My client is ready to negotiate. He's offering a settlement. What are the terms? I asked, trying not to show satisfaction. Dash, Mr. Alistair Thornhill agrees to close Pacific Luxury Cars, to refuse to use the Thornhill name for commercial purposes without your written consent, and to have no contact with Thornhill Motors customers or suppliers for 2 years. In exchange, you will withdraw the lawsuit and cease any action against him and his business. I nodded. Those were exactly the terms I was seeking. I agree. Have Frank Pearson contact you for the paperwork? Jenkins stood up, shook my hand, and headed for the exit, but stopped at the door. Dash, Mr. Thornhill, may I say something off the record? Of course, I was intrigued. Your son is an intelligent young man with great potential. He's learned a lot from you and it shows. But he's in a very difficult situation right now. And not just in business. His marriage. Jenkins hesitated. Well, it's not as smooth as it might seem. Perhaps he needs his father now more than ever. With those words, he walked away, leaving me pensive. What did he mean? Was I right about Kimberly? And was she starting to show her true colors? A week after that conversation, I received a short note from Alistair. Father, Kimberly and I are getting a divorce. It wasn't an easy decision, but it's the only one we can make. She's going to New York. I'm staying in LA. Don't worry, it's civilized. Just wanted you to know. Alistair? I reread the note a few times, not knowing how to feel. Relief? Satisfaction at being right about Kimberly? Regret for the pain Alistair was probably feeling right now? Maybe all of them. I didn't answer the note. Didn't call Alistair. Didn't offer support or comfort. Perhaps that was cruel of me. But I knew that the time was not yet ripe for true reconciliation. Too much had been said. Two deep wounds had been inflicted on both sides. Instead, I made a decision I had been nursing for weeks. I decided to sell Thornhill Motors and move out of Los Angeles. Not right away, of course. I planned a gradual exit from the business over the course of a year or two. Find a worthy buyer, ensure a smooth transition, protect the interests of the employees. And then a new life, away from LA, from the constant reminders of my broken relationship with my son, from Elaine's ghost in every corner of the house. I thought of the Oregon coast, quiet, peaceful, with majestic ocean views. Or maybe a small town in New England, where in the fall the trees blossom in all shades of gold and purple. Somewhere where no one knows the name Thornhill, where I can just be an elderly gentleman enjoying a well-deserved vacation. I told no one of my decision, not even Esther. I just started quietly preparing, studying the market, assessing the value of the company, considering potential buyers. In May, I found a buyer, a large automobile holding company that guaranteed to keep the Thornhill Motors brand and jobs for all employees. The price was fair and the terms were acceptable. I signed a preliminary agreement and set the date for the final deal for the 1st of September. By June, I knew where I was going, a small coastal town in Oregon, near Portland, where Helen lived. I bought a house there overlooking the ocean, spacious but not luxurious, perfect for the quiet life of someone who could finally afford to enjoy some peace and solitude. I informed my employees of my decision to sell the company in early July. The reaction was predictable: shock, bewilderment, anxiety about the future. I tried to reassure them by telling them about the job security in the sale agreement. Betty was crying. Thomas looked lost. Richard couldn't believe I was really leaving. Only Frank Pearson seemed to understand my motives. "Are you sure you want to do this, Sherman?" he asked when we were alone in my office after the general meeting. "Thornhill Motors is your life's work." "It has been," I corrected him. "Now I want to start a new chapter, without the weight of the past, without the constant reminders of what could have been." "What about Alistair?" Frank looked at me carefully. "Did you tell him about the sale?" "No," I shook my head. "And I'm not going to." "He made his choice. I'm making mine." "He's your son, Sherman," Frank reminded me gently. "The only one. And he's probably at the worst time of his life right now. Divorced, no job, no prospects." "He's got money from his severance pay," I countered, "and a brain in his head. He can handle it. And if he doesn't—" Frank wasn't backing down. "What if he breaks? Can you live with that?" I didn't answer. It was a question I'd asked myself every day since I'd gotten Alistair's divorce note. And every day I've convinced myself that my son is stronger than he looks, that he's inherited my resilience and stubbornness. But what if I'm wrong? What if by going away, I leave him at a time when he needs his father most? "I'll think about it," I said at last. "But the decision to sell the company is final." Frank nodded, realizing that I couldn't get more out of him. By August, everything was ready to close the deal. The house in Oregon was waiting for me. Most of my stuff was packed. All that was left was to sign the final papers on the sale of Thornhill Motors and say goodbye to Los Angeles. I looked out my office window at the city for the last time, thinking about all the ups and downs I'd experienced here, about the young guy from Tulsa who came here with a dream and $300 in his pocket, about meeting Elaine, about Alistair's birth, about her death, about years of loneliness and hard work. I was leaving behind not only the business, but all the memories, all the connections, all the relationships, including my only son. I knew I might never see Alistair again, never know how his life would turn out, never be able to help him in his time of need. But that was the price of my own peace of mind. The price of a new life without toxic relationships, without the constant pain of unfulfilled hopes and shattered illusions. I was willing to pay that price.